off a Visual Studio Code plugin I've been working on. And it just does some code coverage with some niceties, in particular for languages that compile to JavaScript. So let's take a look at what we're doing. Let's turn off for now. So we basically just have a little app. It's got a bunch of random branches. You know, I don't like pickles, so hopefully my pantry doesn't have pickles. We're just going through the foods of the pantry. We have this entirely fake thing where this is always true, so we never console log when it's empty. And tacos, bananas, and fajitas are always delicious, but so are cookies and biscuits. And so basically all this does is loop over the foods in that pantry array up top, and if it's tasty, it says nom nom, and if they're apples, I consider apples. But that's all it does. But this is ES6, and a lot of places you can't actually run ES6, even in some cases on Node. So we're going to take Babel and we're going to transform this into the corollary. So basically what we do is we've set up some build scripts, and they're going to do a few things. This just runs Babel and takes lib and puts it into out once it's done. So it generates this thing. And it's got some jargon because Babel is using a runtime, and it's got to pull in the runtime. But it's got a lot of things going on here, but key to us is it generates a source map as well. So most things that compile to JavaScript have source map support available. And that means we can map the output of something we can run in JavaScript to whatever generated that JavaScript. In this case, we can take the code coverage for this output file and show it in the editor for the original file. And what we're doing to do that is we're using Istanbul. Istanbul is pretty simple to use. It's just it's in npm. You run Istanbul cover, the name of your file. In this case, it's going to be out index.js, and it'll generate a coverage folder. And inside the coverage folder, there's going to be a couple things, but the only one we really care about is lcov.info. Lcov is a file format that's available in a lot of languages. So this talk and this plugin they're not only for JavaScript, they're for anything that can generate lcov and eventually more file formats. So let's actually go to our code coverage here. So you quickly saw that it was displayed automatically, and that's a configuration option we'll get to in a second. It doesn't have to be shown automatically, but there's a button down here that will turn it on and off. So yellow is just saying that there's a branch that didn't fully exercise all of its paths. So in this case, there's a runtime function put in here by Babel that doesn't hit all the paths, and we don't really care about that, so we're going to move on. But apparently there are no pickles, so that's good. And then we encounter this red line, and a red line just means that this line was never encountered while running code coverage. And so same thing down here, we have that always true statement, and we never get to console log. And then I didn't have any tacos, bananas, or fajitas in that array, so we don't reach any of those either. And then we scroll a little more, we see more runtime stuff. And this is all runtime stuff. We didn't put any of that in ours. So we want to be sure when we're viewing the original code, this doesn't affect our original stuff. So if we go back to the original code, we see that all the proper lines are still highlighted, which is really good. And what the plugin is doing is it's actually pulling the information out of the output file and this source map associated with it. And so if we want to look at the config on how it's doing that, we actually have a few things in our configuration. So whenever you're editing a file in Microsoft Visual Studio Code, this actually will recursively go up the directory tree looking for coverage config.json. And I don't put it at the root of the workspace because you may actually have multiple of these and they may only apply to a certain directory. So for example, what we have in our lib is the original source code, not the compiled source code. So it's actually got slightly different settings with respect to code coverage and what it's doing. And that's just mainly due to this line here, which we'll talk about in a second. But we accept an array of code coverage files. So you may only be able to generate code coverage for a specific test or a specific file. And we want to be able to merge all of those into the editor so it knows about all of them. Because if you only generate coverage for a single test, you want to be able to either isolate that test or to be able to combine all the coverage of your tests and show it all at once. This lets us ignore some files. By default, it'll try to display coverage information about any file it encounters. So in this case, it's just being told to ignore all JSON files. So if it encounters any code coverage in the lcov, and that's for a JSON file, it won't show it in the editor. And there's automatically shows true. By default, the plugin does not automatically show those lines in code coverage because a lot of times when you're editing, it's just extra noise. So you'll go down here to the bottom and click coverage to toggle it on. And then this line, what we talked about slightly before. Since this is actually being generated into other files, we want to know what files it created and how they are associated with the lib directory. So in this, we're just saying, hey, all of these files actually relate to the JS files in the out directory. And so we could search every single file in the out directory, but that's kind of wasteful. So this is actually going to go and say, hey, if you encounter a JS file, look for the source mapping URL. And we can't actually just put the source maps in here because we need to know where that .map file associates with what source file. So we're including .js because that is where it's going to find the original source file for any source map is. So it accepts an array of patterns here, and you can have, several different things that you're getting coverage info for. In our case, it's just JavaScript. But that's about it, and hopefully this plugin proves useful. Okay, thank you. Bye.